Success is often defined by your customer base. And for Soleix, a thriving SaaS business on AWS, protecting critical workloads and data while allowing applications to be readily available for users and customers was key to their success. Thank you for joining this breakout session as we examine the cybersecurity threat landscape and learn how the team at Soleix layered active threat protection, AWS, and MDR services for a proactive and predictive defense against the latest threats and misconfigurations that we see today. My name is Marian Guerin, and I'm the AWS Alliance Lead, and presenting with me today is Bill Prout, the Director for Global Solutions Engineering. For those not already familiar with Sophos, we are a cybersecurity company, and we've been around for over 30 years now. And today, we are trusted to protect over 100 million users in 150 countries across the world. And we do this by a combination of powerful and intuitive products and solutions providing effective and comprehensive security for organizations of any size. And when we say comprehensive, we mean we cover networks, data, users, and we do that for on-premise networks, remote users, and in the cloud. And we've been working with AWS since AWS Marketplace first launched several years ago, and we're proud to bring that full circle this year as a launch partner for the AWS Level 1 Managed Security Service Provider program. And throughout this breakout session, we are going to discuss how organizations are seeing a shift in the incidents that they could be exposed to. Those incidents which 70% of organizations running workloads and data in the public cloud have seen in the last 12 months. And while blocking these incidents are high priorities for all organizations, some teams are faced with a range of responsibilities, including security. So they need a blend of intuitive, scalable tools and managed services to ensure application uptime and data security. And with this shift, organizations are also seeing an increase in ransomware statistics, with 59% of attacks where data was successfully encrypted, now including data in the public cloud. So now more than ever, it is important to be aware of data security best practices across all environments, whether on-premise, hybrid, or in the public cloud. And this is because the shift in incidents seen is caused by new tactics to automate searches targeting those harder to monitor cloud resources and misconfigurations to gain entry into an organization's environment. And misconfigurations are now causing up to 66% of incidents in public clouds. So organizations need the ability to also shift their focus to continuously monitor for these potential backdoors into an environment. And according to a recent Sophos research project, you can see how quickly someone can identify potential security vulnerabilities from misconfigurations. And these misconfigurations can include vulnerabilities like leaving RDP, SSH exposed, data storage in public mode, or overprivileged IAM roles. And they can be found and targeted in less than a minute, leaving the window to respond quite short. And in addition to that, we're also witnessing an evolution where businesses are becoming software companies and security solutions need to evolve in parallel. As we've seen in recent incidents, software development pipelines can also present vulnerabilities, and organizations need to be able to shift their security approach further to the left. And the challenge can be that IT security teams need comprehensive DevSecOps solutions to help automate many of these processes, increasing efficiencies and reducing errors. And this is where our vision is becoming a reality, as we've developed a world-class global network of managed service providers to help ensure that you stay protected with proper deployment and configuration. So I'm pleased to introduce Soleix, a Sophos customer based from Vancouver, BC, who has a very relatable story. Soleix had a relatively small team of 3 responsible for their workforce management software product, including employee scheduling software, time record, and attendance to help manage diverse workforces and hourly workers. And they were looking for a solution to optimize AWS security posture to block advanced threats and efficiently prioritize AWS alerts such as Amazon Guard Duty to avoid security incidents and keep data secure and private. And ensuring performance and availability of their applications for customers meant a transition from on-premise to AWS was the right choice to accelerate their business. Number one, because they wanted to leverage AWS managed services to make efficient use of in-house skills. And number two, the scalable infrastructure and services enabled them to switch to a SaaS model for their product that made SalaX more accessible to small businesses and helped them accelerate the growth of their business from its foundation of mid-market and enterprise customers. And number three, from a skills development perspective, the AWS platform allowed them to develop the core strengths of their sysadmin team, particularly around automation of software development tasks. And SalaX Director of Software Engineering, Dinesh Adithan, is aware of shared responsibilities with AWS, and their need for data protection was paramount and a key security layer to maintaining availability of their platform whenever users needed it. And depending on the customer, that data can include personally identifiable information, payroll and billing details, client records, and even background certification specifics. And so the availability and security of the threat of the data has a real material impact on their success. So now I'm going to pass it to Bill, who is going to walk through the SalaX architecture.
Thanks, Marion. Now we're going to take a closer look at the SalaX architecture and talk about how Sophos fits in. So the SalaX AWS architecture is comprised of a variety of application EC2 instances, storage and database services, including Amazon S3, Amazon RDS, DynamoDB, Redshift, serverless Lambda functions, and Amazon SNS and SQS services. The architecture shown here is replicated in two AWS regions, each with two availability zones that are used to host the various components and to ensure maximum uptime and scalability for their growing customer base. And while SalaX utilizes AWS security services such as Amazon GuardDuty, they also decided to implement additional layers of next-gen security from Sophos to help guard their complex and dynamic environment against cybersecurity incidents and to help ensure ongoing compliance with data protection standards such as GDPR. The Sophos solutions used by SalaX are the Sophos Intercept X next-gen security agents, which protect EC2 instances against advanced threats such as ransomware. Sophos Cloud Optics, which provides cloud security posture management, continuous compliance checking, and acts as an integration point between AWS security services, IT alert and ticketing systems, and the Sophos Managed Threat Response Service. This complex architecture is something that SalaX has developed over time to support the evolving needs of their customers. Originally, they utilized a smaller set of services, including EC2, S3, and various AWS database services. But as their needs changed, they began leveraging more managed services, including Lambda, to help handle bursts and capacity driven by customer behavior. The use of services such as Lambda simplified parts of their architecture and also helps with cost control. And as the architecture has matured, the SalaX team has also begun automating more processes to help with deploying and updating both the resources and their configurations. And while those improvements have helped in many ways, they still require somebody to manage the overall security for the various components in their design, and someone to manage logs and alerts from these various services to help identify cybersecurity events, something that was a challenge for the small SalaX team. To help address that challenge, SalaX partnered with Sophos to help them with active layered protection, ongoing security and compliance posture management, and 24/7 managed threat detection and response as a service. Together, this combination of security solutions and services allows the SalaX team to optimize their cloud security and compliance posture, understand their risk profile at all times, prioritize AWS security service alerts, and keep data secure and private, all while trying to prevent security incidents. But the partnership with Sophos isn't primarily focused on product capabilities. What it's really focused on is how we distinguish ourselves in helping Dinesh and his team realize a very clear and repeatable cybersecurity strategy, one that any business would do well to follow. So what does that look like? Well, it starts with designing your cloud environment to adhere to best practice standards established by AWS, and then making sure that you have the tools and processes in place to verify those standards are adhered to at all times. and then a way to know in real time if there's any deviations or anomalies which could indicate malicious activity or unauthorized changes that could affect that security posture. Then you should consider what type of security intelligence is available to you, from what sources, and determine how it can be consumed and aggregated together to provide context without adding too much overhead to your resources and your teams. And you should consider how to increase the efficiency of your IT team when it comes to security management and threat hunting by considering managed services that you can partner with. Of course, when doing so, you'll want to ensure that these partners stay current on things like security events, of course, but also offer proactive managed detection, investigation, and importantly, remediation capabilities. Now, we focus on this approach with customers as it allows them to embrace and extend cloud provider security services, such as Amazon GuardDuty or AWS CloudTrail, taking advantage of that security data they provide, and then adding that additional context, which increases clarity. So now let's talk about how Soleax actually realized these cybersecurity goals that they had. So what this really means is that they were adding the right tools, the people, and processes to enable the team to secure what they had running in the AWS cloud, which is, of course, their responsibility as part of the AWS shared responsibility model. This approach is known as operationalizing security in the cloud. And what we mean by this is it's selecting the right software tools, the right people in your organization or in third-party organizations, and the right processes. Now let's spend a little bit of time to look at that in more detail. The right security software tools, by that I mean, of course, cloud-native security tools that you can leverage. And there's also tools from AWS security partners, such as Sophos, that have taken some of these native tools and built on top of them and really enhanced and expanded the capabilities that they provide. So having the right selection of software tools to watch the specific areas of your AWS environment for security incidents is really what we're talking about. And we'll define, of course, the right set of areas in just a moment. Now, people. Having in-house or third-party accessible individuals that are skilled with these particular software tools, whether that's, for example, being able to use a SIEM to respond to events inside your central alert system, or responding and managing native security tools like Amazon GuardDuty or AWS Security Hub. Or it could be leveraging something like the Sophos security stack that we have to offer. So people that are familiar with how to operate the security tools you've chosen is, of course, very important. And the process. Now, what's important here is that there are well-defined processes in place for what may happen on a bad day for your company. So if there is a security incident, what's the process you have in place to respond to that incident, to investigate, triage, and find the root cause? And you'll most likely need different processes and tools for different types of incidents, as a network perimeter event would be different than, say, an event related to identity. So having well-defined processes used by the people that are skilled to operate the tools you have in place is what we're talking about. Okay? Those three things combined is what can help you. And really what we mean when we say operationalizing security in the cloud is maintaining the utmost security in your AWS environment. This new competency is a technical baseline that AWS customers can use and refer to when determining what areas of their AWS environment should be monitored for security events 24/7. And it includes operational guidance. We'll take a look at these 10 level 1 managed security areas now. And later, we're going to share how the new package from Sophos helps organizations address these 10 areas. So the first area is AWS infrastructure vulnerability scanning. This is basically a technical definition, a set of requirements that points to your AWS environment, and it allows you to routinely scan for your AWS infrastructure for known software vulnerabilities. So no doubt you're using different software tools and applications in your environment. And this is a mechanism, as a service, if you will, that will make sure that you're monitoring for known vulnerabilities. The second area is AWS resource inventory visibility. So this is a continuous scan and reporting on of all of your AWS resources and their configuration status. Of course, you've probably heard the old saying, you can't secure what you can't see. And so you first need to be able to make sure that across your security that you have visibility of all of your assets. So your EC2 instances, containers, IAM roles, everything. Any workload running in AWS should be visible to you. And so this is a service that's specifically aimed at making sure you have a complete inventory of everything that you have running in the cloud, and ensure that something such as a shadow IT event where somebody spins up a server you're not aware of doesn't affect your security posture. The third area is AWS security best practice monitoring. So every native service in AWS, EC2, ECR, S3, they all have security configuration best practices defined for them by the AWS team. And this is a service which monitors for those specific best practices against all of the native services that you may be using. And it detects misconfigurations and can alert the person or system monitoring for this specific area if that misconfiguration occurs. So common examples might be something like an S3 bucket that's left open to the public internet, something that you don't necessarily want. Now, the fourth area is AWS compliance monitoring. So we've taken some of the most common compliance areas, such as CIS, foundations, benchmarks, PIS, DSS, HIPAA, GDPR. And the idea here is similar to what we just discussed in that this is a service that can monitor your AWS environment for compliance status against these standards, and then notify a person or a service if there's some kind of deviation from the settings which are required for that service or that standard. The fifth is monitor and triage security events. Now, this is a service which is able to monitor all the areas that we're looking at on our screen here, and the other 5 that will be displayed here in just a moment. For security events, there should also be recommended remediation guidance or full remediation done as a service. Remediation actions could be things like close open ports accessible to the internet or shut down unauthorized EC2 instances. That needs to be part of the service. And the sixth area is really to make sure that number 5 is happening around the clock, 24/7. Attackers are not working 9 to 5. It happens around the clock and usually at the most inconvenient times. So your managed security services should all be monitored around the clock as well, of course. Now, number 7, distributed denial of service or DDoS mitigation. So this has to do with the edge of your cloud environment, and you should have a service in place to be able to monitor for potential DDoS attacks that could impact the availability of your internet-facing applications. And that service that you use should have the ability to detect these events, prevent them, and or mitigate them for you. The 8th area is managed intrusion prevention, otherwise known as IPS. So this is a defensive service that defends against known threat patterns, typically on the network side, and it increases your overall security posture within your cloud environment. And next up, the 9th area is managed detection and response. Now, specifically MDR for AWS-based endpoints and workloads, where an endpoint is an EC2 instance or an application, maybe a container or a serverless function, but it's a combination of software running on those endpoints, which is monitoring for threats at the infrastructure level, and human beings or experts that are trained in AWS security environments that are looking for potential security threats, detecting them, investigating, and of course, removing them if they occur. And the 10th and final area is managed web application firewall, otherwise known in the industry as WAF. Okay? This protects your web-facing application and your APIs against some of the most common exploits that are out there and are very prevalent on the internet. So that bundle, that combination of those 10 areas, we call them the level 1 managed security services. And we recommend that you cover them within your organization. If you cover 3 of them, we highly recommend that you cover the other 7. If you're covering 5 on your own and you need help with the other 5, that's a great reason to speak to us here at Sophos, as we're in the Level 1 MSSP Competency Program. So let's break down this Sophos package we referred to earlier that's been designed for this new competency. If you lack the in-house resources or time to manage cloud security yourself, this package of protection technology, wrapped with 24/7 managed threat response, which we call MTR, was specifically designed to deliver the easy button for cybersecurity on AWS, taking the weight of cloud security off your shoulders. And if you have capabilities internally to do active threat hunting yourselves, you can certainly leverage our XDR capabilities and our data lake that will ingest telemetry from endpoint, server, firewall, and AWS to run live queries to search across your environment. The Sophos AWS MSSP bundle fuses automated protection across cloud workloads, virtual networks, and endpoints. And you combine that with Sophos 24/7 MTR services to create a single cybersecurity package to secure data, proactively prevent vulnerabilities, and block advanced threats. So you will have a dedicated team of security experts from our MTR service continuously monitoring your AWS environments to respond to security events. Whether it's 3 a.m. in the morning, weekends, holidays, it doesn't matter. There's also a very flexible deployment approach that allows protection to be managed in-house by you, the customer, through a Sophos Managed Services partner to ensure the correct deployment, configuration, and day-to-day security management, or as a third option, Sophos professional service teams can help with that initial deployment. And from an AWS platform perspective, it helps customers like Solex to achieve greater value from AWS services. So key security services such as AWS CloudTrail, Amazon GuardDuty, AWS Security Hub. These security findings from these services are analyzed, the risk is assessed, and they're prioritized accordingly to ensure nothing's lost in the noise of your entire cloud environment. And that tight integration with AWS services is a core strength of the package. Provided by the Sophos CloudOptic product, it allowed our customer Solex and other customers to really shift their focus to proactively prevent security vulnerabilities and have that platform telemetry fed into the MTR team for investigations and, of course, a response. The Solex IT team had intuitively designed their environment to adhere to best practices and standards established by AWS to establish a robust security foundation, including organizational account structures, controlling access, locking down root accounts, regular backup schedules, with backup data stored in private storage that's not attached to the network or workload level. And the value of Sophos Cloud Security Posture Management, or CloudOptics, is that it allows Solex to continuously monitor their environments and then identify when exceptions or changes are made that and having a tool that's at the same time learning behavior. For Dinesh, CloudOptics' power was in identifying unusual changes, acting as a filter on top of AWS to prioritize the information they get, and delivering a range of capabilities that enabled their small team to proactively identify security weak points before they're being exploited. So, providing on-demand visibility of all networks and resources running in your environment. Running detailed security and compliance assessments with custom policies, which also then in parallel create risk-based prioritized alerts with guided remediation information that allows you to fix configuration issues sooner and avoid them being exploited in attacks. It also means enabling security teams to shift left and prevent security vulnerabilities from being introduced into your environment via development pipelines. So this means proactively scanning things like container images and infrastructure as code templates before they're deployed into production. And while extending your visibility to simplify complex interwoven IAM roles through the CloudOptics IAM Visualizer, This helps with identifying both human and non-human service access and identify things like overprivileged entities. So let's bring this to life and unpack a couple examples of how this technology is actually used in the real world. First of all, let's talk about a common example, which is identifying IAM users with multi-factor authentication disabled. So Optics provides complete visibility of all resources that are running in the cloud. And it allows you to highlight IAM entity details to see specifically where your problems might lie, and it includes things like color coding to help prioritize. It allows you to drill down to easily understand exactly how these entities, in this case, interact with other services and what they look like in terms of their security posture according to those best practices we talked about before. And as I mentioned before, Cloud Optics analyzes this information and then provides proactive alerts. It doesn't wait for you to just check that information. And that allows you to really identify and understand what the risk prioritization is of these different entities, how they're accessing things, and identify things like anomalies. And the alerts add additional context so you can really understand how vulnerable you may be for something such as a misconfiguration and how that entity may impact other services and roles and users in the organization across your environment. And as you're creating alerts, you can actually send those alerts that Optics creates to users or to systems for workflows, whether they're automated or manual. And you can add in additional context as you're doing so that you can assign them to the proper people in the organization or assign a proper priority to them. Now, we talked about IAM a bit because it is a good example of a service that can be exploited a lot of times due to the complexity of managing it. So IAM roles have a complex web of access permissions within your AWS environment. And one of the biggest problems that many customers face is overprivileged users or roles. They're often exploited to gain entry and then move around within the environment. Now, it's all too common for maybe new personnel in development or engineering to be set up with privileges that they don't need or use. That's a very common use case. And unfortunately, as we saw in a not too long ago high-profile exploit, those IAM roles and permissions can be used by attackers to access your environment and then exfiltrate compromised data. Okay, so think of it like lateral movement for access, but in the cloud. But as you can see here, one of the things Cloud Optics provides is a really nice, easy to understand visualization of the complex relationships between those users, the groups, and the services. That makes it much easier to understand and make sense of the interwoven nature of relationships between these individuals and groups and roles to these services. So first off, what it does is paint a picture of that entire access, that whole web. And then it allows you to drill down and understand exact pathways between something like, say, a user and that service. And it also ties in contextual information on things like overprivileged access. So if a user or a service has permissions they've never used, that will be identified. And you can then determine also through the Sophos AI how much of a risk there is with that service access. And then we even give you an understanding and a capability to right-size those identity access management policies. So we can actually identify the ones that are unused and suggest a policy that you can then apply, which would lock down that access to least privilege, which is what you want. Now, another real-world example is the exposure of open RDP ports. So this is a security problem because RDP is used over the internet, but it's something that attackers, of course, are aware of. And they use various brute force techniques to gain access to virtual machines. But it's such a common protocol, it's often hard to understand if that traffic coming in is valid or not, or how exposed and vulnerable that particular service may be. So once attackers gain access, they can then use those virtual machines as a launch point for compromising other machines on your network. So one of the things that you can do with Sophos is you can actually use a combination of our technologies to help. So if you take a look at somebody setting up RDP access in their AWS console, they're able to set up access to any of their EC2 instances. But CloudOptics, if it's monitoring, can actually then identify that traffic for you. So that's good to understand. It'll alert and let you know if that access is open to everyone on the internet. So it'll give you that kind of alert, which starts giving you some context. Gives you specific details about that, which you can then use with our other products. So we can understand more information, which will help us to understand, is this actually a threat or not? So our XDR data lake will actually provide information that you can use to understand and run queries. Both pre-built queries are available, and you can customize queries. And they can help you better understand who actually is connecting to your RDP service, and is it successful or not? So with that, you can really understand, are most of the connections valid, or are we suffering some kind of brute force attack? And that way you can better understand and lock down perhaps the access to only those networks that really need the access. So this is a combination in the same console of powerful technologies that can be used by customers in threat hunting, as well as these technologies are used by our MTR team in threat hunting for customers. Now, we've also added in the capability to add telemetry from AWS services, specifically from AWS CloudTrail, into our XDR data lake. So this can really enhance threat detection and response in AWS. And here's just a quick example of how you can use that. So if you take a look at feeding this data in through our CloudOptics product into the data lake, the extended detection and response includes easy to follow queries that can be used when you're actually doing any kind of threat hunting. We have pre-built about 40 queries in there, but again, there's the capability to customize queries as needed to take a look. But this now gives you the ability to take a look across your entire environment and do threat hunting and better understand the context of any kind of API calls that might be happening in your environment. So you can pair that with, the information that's coming from AWS security services, from things like our own Sophos endpoint products, and really get a better understanding of what it might look like. Because with CloudOptics processing and analyzing the AWS environment data, we're associating the information that we receive in the data lake with the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, which is really used to identify attacker techniques, and that helps layer in threat intelligence context from associated services, including those agents that I mentioned, which can really help you speed up the investigation process and understand the threats to your environment. Now, we mentioned before that what really connects the dots for our customer Soleix are the managed services that Sophos provides. We talked just now about the tools that are available for any customer, but Soleix has a small team, and as they put it, bad guys are going to work 24/7, so they really needed some help. So that's true of a lot of IT teams out there, large and small. It's not realistic to keep a team that's monitoring security around the clock unless you're a very big organization. And in terms of career development, there should be focus on core areas of responsibility and skill development there. So the case with Soleix was they have sysadmins who need to stay focused on software development and not solely monitoring security. So that's where Sophos Managed Threat Response Service team comes in. The team takes proactive action and applies security updates as regularly as possible. They preemptively reach out and advise Soleix on recommended next steps, and with lots of moving parts in their architecture, their support has been hugely valuable. The team at Soleix are also big believers in automating tasks and working smarter, and so it was reassuring when Sophos MTR signaled unusual activity when applying scripts or changing release processes. It's proof that the Sophos server is working as it should and that people are actually paying attention to what's going on. And that also helped their team confidently move faster. So the Sophos Managed Threat Response Service teams, they receive telemetry from all Sophos products deployed in AWS, from Cloud Optics CSPM, workload protection delivered via the InterceptX agents, from our Sophos firewalls deployed in AWS VPCs, and they also provide or receive intelligence from the AWS security services, AWS or Amazon GuardDuty, AWS CloudTrail, and Security Hub. And this enables 24/7 threat protection, monitoring, and response across the entire AWS environment. So if you're wondering what MTR that we've mentioned a few times looks like, we actually provide a variety of different reports for customers as well as any of our partners. Now the screenshot you're seeing now shows you how many devices are protected with MTR, the number of detections, how many cases there were, escalations, incidents. And you can look at that 20 hours after a detection, and if it was a medium or high severity, and you can see the number of monthly detections. So there's a lot of information that's provided. And then if there's something that we actually find, then we produce a timeline of the incident. So here's a good example where we saw some malicious activity, and over time we were able to identify the compromise, isolate the, in this case, ransomware attack, and then respond and be able to reset passwords and ensure that whoever's behind the attempt is unable to get in any longer. So with that, I'm going to pass you back over to Marian to finish up.
Thank you, Bill. And to quote Dinesh from Solex, Sophos is there 24/7, so my team doesn't need to be. For Solex and many more of our customers, it may not be realistic to keep teams monitoring security around the clock, so it can be more cost-effective for you to look at outsourcing and realigning those internal resources to more revenue-generating activities. And so when we reflect on the Sophos MSSP package that Bill just presented, it's really designed to help organizations reduce risk, increase cloud security posture, and fill cybersecurity skills gaps, addressing 3 key areas. First, around resources. The Sophos Managed Threat Response team adds expert resources to help you increase the efficiency of your security program and internal teams, preemptively reaching out and advising customers on recommended next steps or acting on your behalf if you wish. Second is around skills. Most cloud security incidents could be proactively prevented with proper configuration and a good understanding of cloud providers' shared responsibility models. So the Sophos package layers additional security tools on top of AWS to block advanced threats and will cut through alert noise to help in-house teams or partners know what AWS services and alerts to prioritize with guided remediation to fix them proactively. And finally, addressing IT budgets. Forrester predicts that 17% of all B2B transactions will be through e-commerce and marketplaces by 2023, as companies shift to subscription and consumption-based models. And by purchasing Sophos on AWS Marketplace, you can modernize procurement and combine cloud infrastructure and security in one invoice, achieving greater executive alignment across security and infrastructure teams. To learn more about Sophos and the MSSP package, you can either download the 1-minute session infographic or visit the MSSP landing page. Thank you for listening.